This is a D6 generation pip. One of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a pip. A short pip. Little something. About anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today. Hey, and welcome back. Oh, I hear music. This can only mean one thing. Craig's brand new Song of Ice and Fire campaign is underway, or about to be underway.
It's about to be underway.
I may have overstated the underwayness.
It's
But we actually tweeted a little teaser picture for this, Craig.
We did, and we're about to tweet another one.
So what's exciting about this? So Craig sort of surprised myself and my brother John and our friend Joe, and he's like, hey, you know what we should do? We should start playing regular games of the miniature game Song of Ice and Fire, but not just play the game like willy-nilly one-off. No.
Yeah.
We should play a map-based campaign.
Yeah.
Based on what, Craig?
Well, Russ, it's funny you should ask. This is based on I think it was 2007 product from Games Workshop called Mighty Empires.
Yes.
Which in and of itself was a sort of a rebuild of the board game Mighty Empires.
Yes.
Which was an interesting board game that was a board game unto itself, and it was one of those things that Games Workshop has done occasionally where they have a board game that's a self-sustained board game, but then they say, what this could really be is a campaign where you could use the board game as a map, and whenever there's a battle, you could have like a Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar now?
Yeah.
Battle. And when they came out with Mighty Empires, the second one, I think it was 1993 might have been the first one, and then 2007 was the one that we're using. Really, all it was a set of 48 hard plastic terrain,
three-dimensional
hexagonal terrain tiles, and a bunch of little bits and pieces like castles and cities and mines
that kind of pin into the tiles.
That pin into the tiles, exactly, and a bunch of flags to show which tiles you own. And then in the White Dwarf, they included a sprue of 3 cool little iconic tokens that would go in there. One was a savage orc sacred circle, one was a high elven wizard's tower, and one was Bugman's Brewery, actually, which was really cool.
And you have all that.
And I have all that.
And then they came out with a 40K set.
They do.
Of buildings.
They did.
Or little pins to put in as
the
well.
Maps. The actual maps.
But we should describe these tiles because they're really cool.
They're beautiful.
So they're maybe like, what, 2 inches, 3 inches wide?
They're about 2, I would say closer to 2, maybe
about
2.5.
2 inches roughly in diameter or wide, and they're little hexagons, and they interlock. So there's like little tabs on each center of each facing, and they lock together.
Yep.
And then there's and they're three-dimensional, right? So there's like little mountains.
Yep.
Or little swamps.
Or rivers.
Or little farmlands.
Or forests.
Now, you painted them all up.
I did.
Now, were the farmlands pre-etched, or you had to paint everything?
Everything. You have to paint everything, but it's already there.
And then, in addition, in the box, were campaign rules.
Yes.
For doing between miniature game, round movements, troop movements. Yep. What is it? What are the mechanics for owning a particular tile? What are the advantages? And what's the overall campaign objectives? All that was built in.
Yep. It's a pamphlet, really, and that's the complaint. You'll find a lot of complaints of the Mighty Empires system.
Why do people complain, Craig?
Because it's very thin. It's kind of a bare bones.
But they gave you a box of cool tiles, and you can make up whatever rules you want.
All you're doing is you're buying it for the tiles.
That's all you're doing.
And secondly, I mean, we've done this before. We did it a long time ago. And all you're doing, I mean, I've actually done it a bunch. You know what we did? I don't know if you remember this, but back when we were playing, what was it? Dust Warfare.
Yes.
I did a very brief, I think it was even a one-night map campaign where we just did a 4x4 hex map.
Yes.
Using these hexes. And we did it, and I had totally different rules, and you had to, it was blind movement. You didn't know where each person had their army spread over 3 flags. And
so let me ask you this.
It's great, because it's very flexible.
Now, what appeals to you? Now, I've had some, back in the day, we talked about the XCAM and other methodologies to make you feel like every game matters, but not trouble yourself with a map.
Right.
But for sake of argument, why does the map campaign appeal to you? What do you like about that?
I love that there is a map and you can see your progression. You're not just counting points, which I love the XCAM
It kind of feels like a world dominant situation.
Exactly. It feels like there's more real world. Rather than just look at a leaderboard, you're looking at a map and you're seeing all the colored flags start to spread out. And what the map does for you is, initially it's abstract. Initially, like Russ and I might play a game, and our starting forts. Russ is starting in the Night Fort, by the way.
Yes.
Which, of course, fans of the books A Song of Ice and Fire know there is a secret weirwood door beneath the wall.
We've already taken control.
Fort.
We're the free folk, so we've already taken control.
Well, you have to be a man of the Night's Watch to get through that door. And
you do.
Mance Raider started as a man of the Night's Watch.
And once you're in, you're never out.
That's right. Theoretically.
Now let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
So you got all these great tiles.
Yep.
And you've played it a little bit before.
Yep.
And you're sitting there, and you're cleaning up the pub. And in my mind, I'm imagining you're cleaning up the pub and you find these tiles.
I did.
And you're like, man, it'd be kind of fun to use these again.
Yep.
You have like a plethora of miniature games to choose from.
I do.
What drew you to Song of Ice and Fire when you were looking at these tiles? What made you decide, you know what game I should massage these rules for? Song of Ice and Fire. Why did you go there?
Well, it's interesting you should ask, Russ. It's because I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I love the rules for A Song of Ice and Fire.
Why do you love the rules, Craig?
They are simple, they're elegant, but within the card system, the tactics cards and the characters, you have all of these and they're doing what every game company does, where they tighten everything up to a specific set of keywords, which is great. But there's so much character in it, and I'm so invested in that world, although I'm still ripping that the world is still unfinished as far as the books go. And
Just go to the show.
I know, but the last season of the show makes that.
It's better to have a bad ending than no ending, Craig.
I know.
You got to give the show guys that.
I know that. Yeah, that's true. You got to give them something anyway. But I have never, and I started thinking over the last couple of days, knowing that you and I were going to record this. I loved Warhammer 40K. I loved Warhammer Fantasy. I've never played Age of Sigmar, but that's not for nothing. That's just, I haven't really started a new 40K army. Well, that's not true. I started too, so never mind that. But I loved the game. I loved the worlds. I loved the armies. I never loved the game.
Right.
I've never ever loved Warhammer 40,000, the game.
Right. Even back in the day, though.
I loved playing it. I loved the world. I wrote all those stories about it. We ran a whole bunch of these campaigns for it. The world was great. I never once got excited about a mechanic within, especially considering they change it every 2 to 3 years.
So why not go right to Age of Sigmar?
I was never really got called. Fantasy was always a second fiddle to me.
Don't like the big blocks?
40K. No, I don't mind them at all. Song of Ice and Fire has the big blocks.
Fair.
But it just, their fantasy world wasn't as compelling to me, and the armies weren't as compelling to me, which didn't stop me from having 3 of them by the end.
Right.
But it for some reason the Warhammer 40,000, the universe is richer to me. It's more fully fleshed out. It's more differentiated from other science fiction properties. But even there, I never got excited like, ooh, a heavy bolter is gonna fire 3 dice. Ooh, yeah, it wasn't. Whereas in A Song of Ice and Fire, I'm like, oh wait, when I get the right card, these Dothraki are not only going to hit Russ's unit from the side, then they're going to kill them all, and they're going to wipe on through. They're going to charge the next guy because I've got this other card. And so it's and I know I don't like card games usually, but it's like the game is building these combos as you go. And I think it completely captures this world that was ready-made for it, right? The books are there with at least as much lore as any other miniatures game has, but the mechanics are so well suited, and you've got the off battlefield tactics board, so you've got the the politics going on the side, which is very Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. And so there are things that happen in almost every game of A Song of Ice and Fire, sometimes for you, sometimes against you, where you go, oh my God, that was perfect. There's no game that could have captured that kind of an event or that kind of moment better than that. and so I love that. I feel the same way about Star Wars Legion. The mechanics are so well suited to the stories that the game is telling, and I feel that way too about other more skirmish based games. But these two in particular, and so in my head, I was like, okay, so if I'm going to get the guys to do this, it's either going to be Star Wars or it's going to be a Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. I have been revisiting a Song of Ice and Fire. I'm on Feast for Crows right now, at 1.7 speed, because Roy Dotrice is a great narrator. Although he does change
He's very deliberate.
He's very deliberate, exactly. And he changes the voices and the pronunciation of names a little bit as he gets a little older.
These things evolve.
Yeah, and...
it goes from Old English to New English.
Yeah, there you go. That's true. That might have happened.
Now, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So you decided Song of Ice and Fire.
Yep.
It may or may not be related to the fact that you did just recently pick up the Dothraki.
Oh, I may or may not have gotten the Dothraki army from my
You also had a new army
in-laws.
calling to you. So you got the new army.
Yeah.
You're reading the books. You dig up your old hexagons, and you're like, man, this would be fun with Song of Ice and Fire.
Yep.
So I'm guessing you pulled out the rule books for...
I did.
For the old tile campaign system.
Pamphlet. Yeah.
The pamphlet.
Yep.
And you thought... This is going to be hard to modify for Song of Ice and Fire? Easy?
No, I didn't even think I was going to have to modify it at first, which defies actual
Logic?
thought and logic.
Reason?
Because
Intellect?
point values,
Wisdom?
point values are wildly different.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking in a Song of Ice and Fire, your small game is a 30-point game, your medium size is 40, and your large size is 50. In Warhammer 40,000 or Warhammer Fantasy, you're talking about the 1,000 points, 1,500 points, or 2,000 points. So everything in the game that modifies point values had to be changed. But in addition to that, once I started combing through it and started changing those things, I started thinking, oh, you know what else? We could change the names of things. We could change the stories of why things happen. And then I had to change a lot of the benefits you gain from certain things in certain terrain and things like that. And a Song of Ice and Fire, because it's so well designed, the rule book is a pamphlet for the most part,
right,
for a Song of Ice and Fire. So, but it has everything in it. So, being able to connect your frontline fortress with the battlefield you're going to fight on, which I'll explain in a second, in the Mighty Empires book, gave you a certain value of points. And I initially did that, but then I thought, well, like
there's scenario cards.
It gives you, there's scenario cards and there's tactics cards, and having more tactics cards gives you more options, and that's what a road would give you. Maybe you got there early, and if you have a particularly mobile army, that's built into the tactics cards.
Right.
Maybe you got there early and you set up ambushes, and that's already built into the tactics cards for armies that do ambushing and things like that. So there's a lot that the Song of Ice and Fire game has. A lot of depth that Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40,000, and no hate, I'm not hating on those games. I'm just trying to explain there's a lot more mechanics involved in a Song of Ice and Fire that lend themselves to these kinds of advantages. So you can have different kinds of advantages as opposed to more points or a deeper deployment zone, things like that. And so I started to see that. And then, of course, because this is not intended for making money or anything, so I just took out all... I have this... When I first did it, years and years and years and years and years ago, I rewrote it into a Word document and put in lots of cool art that I found online. And what I did was replace all that art with lots of cool Song of Ice and Fire art that I found online. And then, like I said, change the point values and change a lot of the bonuses, and the terrain impacts had to be different because of the way terrain works in one game versus the other game. But at the same time, like I said, ultimately, it's an abstract kind of map game because at the beginning, like I was going to say, Russ is very far. So the Knight's Fort is very far away from Carhold, which is where my guys are starting. And what I did was... We'll explain in a second how you build the map, but we built the map traditionally, so it's going to be a random map. But then it just so happened that John's playing the Night's Watch, and Russ, who's playing the Free Folk, are kind of like along the same board edge. So I made that the wall. So that had to be north. And then I looked at what different towns there were in the southern part of the north, the Kingdom of the North, and I assigned the 2 other starting points to those towns. So it's really neat because it pins to specific places in the story. So Russ and I are not anywhere close to each other, but in the first couple of rounds of the campaign, we might fight, but it's a more of an abstract, like our forces are out there somewhere and they skirmish. And then what happens is you get a certain amount of empire points. I don't think I changed that name, and that's the name that the Mighty Empires used. And you spend those to expand your realm or to build things within your realm. And then when your realm and everybody else's realm start to expand out, that's when you start to fight over adjacent pieces. Like maybe, let's say Russ takes Bugman's Brewery, which in the Song of Ice and Fire packet that I made is actually the Crossroads Inn, which is cool, and conveys an advantage in tactics cards because you can hear all kinds of rumors and you'll get some advantage from that. I then, if I want to take that from him, I now have to challenge Russ in the challenge phase, and I have to specify we're fighting for that hex. And if I didn't do that, even if I win, I can't take that away from Russ. I have to beat him in a game targeting that hex to actually now take us. And so,
because some hexes give you defenses if you're fighting over that hex.
Indeed,
right?
yeah.
So that's why you have to clarify which hex it is.
Exactly. And they some of them have assets and advantages, and some of them dictate what kind of terrain you're going to have. And so it's abstract at the beginning, but then as everybody expands and you get later in the campaign, it starts to have a very concrete impact on the campaign itself as you're starting to fight over specific assets or specific terrain. And I that really appeals to me because I love the XCAM in its simplicity and its lack of a lot of bookkeeping. But I love the map campaign, so I'm torn always, but I love the map campaign for its late game, real world, like real game, in-game impact for people fighting over specific assets and things like that.
So how do you win?
How do you win? It's simple. You have 10 empire points at the end, and you have each tile is 1 empire point. Each castle, each tile with a castle, I don't think you get an extra point for a castle, but you do for a city. So you can spend empire points to change your castles to cities.
Got it.
And so you're looking for 10 points total, and that's going to be whether it's 10 tiles or it could be 8 tiles with 2 cities or whatnot. And so it's basically, that's how it's tracking. And so you don't have to have a leaderboard or anything. You can just look at the map and say, Russ has 8 flags. This thing's about to be over. And it's also interesting in your placement of the castles. So we should talk a little bit about how you build the map, which is very simple. So you have 48 tiles, and I think 6 of them are mountain tiles. So they're only one-sided.
Which are the coolest tiles?
They are the coolest. Russ loves the other tiles. 42, if my math is correct. Or no, 30, 36?
Math's hard. Don't hurt yourself.
48, 42. Yeah. I can't remember. Yeah. But anyway, the rest of the tiles are double-sided, which is cool. And there are some very basic rules. You start with 2 mountain tiles, and every time you put a new tile, it has to be connecting to 2 tiles that already exist. And what happens is you get to choose between the 2 boxes. So it's a blind draw out of the majority of tiles, and you put it down blind, and whatever side is up, that's the side you have to use. Right. Or you pick a mountain. Or if you're Russ, you pick a mountain tile and you talk about how giants love romping through the mountains.
That's right.
So if you look at the map on Twitter or wherever else it might show up, you'll see there's a spine of mountains that goes through the middle of our map, and that was all Russ.
Yes.
And you'll see a billion rivers, and that was all me.
Yes.
Because I think rivers are cool, because I did a water effect on the rivers, so they're all glossy. And in the swamps, too, which was a giant pain. But so it's cool. So there's swamps, and there's forests, and there's villages, and you build out the map. And there are only a couple simple rules. The river, if a river can only start on a mountain or a swamp tile, and it can only end at the edge of the board or on a swamp tile. So you can have a river go from one swamp to another, or generally from like a mountain to a swamp. or off the board edge, which you get a lot of those. But it's hard to finish those river tiles because they like that whole section of the board has to be built out because you always have to put a piece so it's connected to 2 other pieces. So it's hard, and that's the only example of when you're allowed to flip the tile is if you get a river tile that cannot be placed, then you can flip it to its other side. And everybody started to do cool themes, like John, or was it John or you? I think it was John, because you were building the forest. Started to build, you named it though. Oh no.
Sherwood Forest.
Sherwood Forest.
Yeah.
Sherwood.
I was driving themes.
Let's share some forests.
I was shared woods.
So there's shared woods, and that just kind of like builds out, and then everybody in a random order puts down a castle, and you don't know which. Oh, and then the iconic things go down. So the way that I reskinned it, so it's more of a reskin than anything else. Bugman's became the Crossroads Inn. The Elven Tower became a Maester's Tower, so it has sort of healing or advantage in off-board tactics. And then the little orc thing became a Weirwood Grove, which is very spiritually enlightening in A Song of Ice and Fire.
I think you should have made a little tree.
I've been looking. Okay. I've been looking.
So let me ask you this.
Yes.
So the map's set up.
Yep.
And we've got all the special tiles down.
Yep.
We know what's going on.
And the castle.
So give a high level really quickly, like what does a campaign round look like? What do you do?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Let me flip open my thing. The campaign turn starts, it has 5 sections total.
5 phases,
so
if you will.
5 phases, if you will. The first one is events, which is kind of cool, and it starts in the order of the person who's the weakest in the campaign. So the smallest realm or empire.
That's John.
And well, right now it's all of us.
Okay.
Okay. Gets to choose one of 8 advantages, and no one can choose an advantage that's already been taken.
So it's a catch-up mechanic. The weakest player gets an advantage.
Exactly, and some of them are really cool. Like I changed the names, so I can't remember what the original names were. The Bloody Mummers Strike, which of course the Bloody Mummers are this horrible mercenary band. In the books, they actually switch sides in the middle of the war. And so you never knew when they came down on you whether they were going to be your friend or your enemy. So that is an advantage where you choose one person and they're not able to gain any income that turn. So all of their farms or whatnot are shut off. It would be mean. It would be very aggressive.
Yeah.
Then there's the Dwarfs Industry, which of course that would be Tyrion Lannister, who is really good at building things. And then that you get basically a free castle or a mine at the end of the whole campaign turn. And there are things like that. We don't have to go through all of them. But there's 8 advantages. Some are better than others. And so if you're the lowest guy on the totem pole, you get to choose whatever you're going to choose. And then, the stronger you are, you're going to probably end up with one of the weaker advantages. Then there's income. And the income is factored in by mines in Mighty Empires. And I did tweak this a little bit. A mine in Mighty Empires can be placed on a river or a mountain tile, and one in a mountain tile is more valuable than a river tile. I added that you could also put them in a farming tile to do a healing mechanic, because the number of models in a unit in A Song of Ice and Fire isn't so much just how many guys are in that unit. It's also tracking morale, it's tracking their versatility, their endurance, because you can lose guys and gain guys through the whole battle, which is one of the many cool things about the game. So there's a healing mechanic. There's several different ways you can heal units over the course of a game, and I decided that if you had more food, your guys would be more resilient, and so you can put a mine on a farm tile also to be able to start getting that healing factor. So that happens in the income phase. Also, what normally happens in Mighty Empires is you're gaining, I think, 2d6 or 3d6 times 10 points, which would have been entire armies in Song of Ice and Fire. So I just made it d3, or 2d3 or 3d3. And so everybody gets that. So everybody's going to have a certain amount of points that they can use to buy units above and beyond whatever the agreed upon level is for that round. Then there's challenges, again, starting with the lowest person. They're going to challenge anybody in the campaign. And the campaign is written for as many people as you want to use fighting. So there are mechanics for more than one person fighting. Like, so 2 different people could challenge Russ, for instance. If Russ is in the lead,
that seems
2
rude.
different. That too is rude. But it goes around, and once you've been challenged, you don't get a challenge. That's going to be your fight.
Could everybody challenge me?
everybody could challenge you, but because what happens then is I think it breaks down into multiple games.
Got it.
I've never played with that many people, but it's written in, so every time I reskinned it, I did include that and carry it through to whatever theme I was covering it with the next time. But that is in there. So the challenges, which in our campaign they'll always be 2 games basically, and it'll all break down into the lowest 2 people. The lowest person gets to choose who they're going to fight, and then the other low person, actually, I guess, could choose if they wanted to fight the same person. But then the third person could choose to challenge someone else who's fighting, and then that would break it up further into two games of 2. Then you fight your battles. And basically, by the time you finish your battle, your outcome is going to gain you certain empire points, like I explained. And these games end almost immediately if you reach a certain amount of points, so a victory point. So a 30-point game ends when somebody gets to 8, and a middle-level game ends at 10, and a big game ends at 12. And the number of empire points you get is based on how much you won by. So a tie would be a tie, or you only won by 1 point.
So a major victory is definitely worth more.
Exactly. Yeah. A major victory, you could really start spreading your empire out. You're going to explode if you get a big major victory. But it means that you really crushed the other guy. And so that's the conquest and build. And it's called conquest and build because you're taking over tiles. And remember, the only way you can take a tile away from somebody is if you targeted it in the challenge phase. And so you can also build. That's when you're going to be building your mines. That's when you're going to be building your castles or turning castles into cities. And that's one other option for trying to win is to you have a bunch of castles and then start popping them into cities, and they start, gaining you more points. And that's the whole thing. And then you start over,
and then reset and rebuild.
You reset and start again. Yep.
Sounds great. So what are some examples of what some of the tiles do? Good question. What should I be going for? What kind of variety is going on here? Like, how does a castle with a fort help me defend? Don't give me all of them, but a couple examples to give me some flavor.
Well, the castle, if you're attacking somebody else's castle, you're going to fight.
Do you fight a siege?
You're going to fight the siege battle. Yeah.
Nice.
Which, awesome. Of course, there's a siege battle.
There's clean siege mechanics in the game. There's a whole card set around that, and it still works. And you can have like models for walls and stuff, but you don't need them.
Yep.
There's also
you don't need them. We do
them.
have them, so
we
that's
do
because
of course we do.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so if you're attacking someone's city or fort, then you're going to be doing a siege. Right. If you are attacking a forest tile, then if you own it, you get to choose one of your units and they gain Pathfinder, so they ignore terrain. And then in the terrain generation part of the game, there's going to be more forest tiles on the board. Swamps are really bad for horses, so if you're playing on a swamp tile, the entire board counts as difficult terrain for horses.
Ooh,
and war machines, so you can bet the Dothraki will be avoiding swamps.
Yes.
So it would be interesting, like, let's say Russ decides that he wants to make a move on me. He could pretty much guarantee himself that he could plant a flag in my neighborhood by winning a swamp near me, because I'm just not going to take that hit. And so that would be marshes or swamps. There's deserts, there's roads. Each of the tiles has they're like little rills, they're little rivers, but I painted half of those as roads. And so there's an abstract element of, if you can trace hexes all the way from your nearest fort to where you're targeting, you actually get a bonus because of the roads, things like that. So the tiles are going to have real game impact if it's being... if you own it and somebody's trying to take it away from you, and it will also have a real game impact on like the kind of benefits, bonuses it gives you, and the terrain that gets put down.
Nice. Yeah. So now that you've examined the board,
yes,
you've examined the starting position. So all we've done so far in the campaign is we picked our factions.
Yep.
We've laid out the board in the methodology you described earlier.
Yep.
And then we've all selected our starting positions.
Yes.
Now, knowing what you know about the tiles, knowing what you know about the players involved, knowing what you know about the armies, who do you think has an advantage and who do you think is going to win?
Well, it's funny you should ask, Russ. I was staring at that map for a couple hours over the last few days, trying to make that little 1-minute video that I made that I'll post later tonight. And I think Joe has a distinct advantage. I think if he drives into the Sherwood Forest area, he's going away from everybody.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have to, I'm the closest.
I drive him out of the woods.
I would have to head for him if I want to start taking things away from him. So he could theoretically grow away from us and continually be fighting those abstract battles.
Yeah.
I don't think there's 10 hexes in that whole corner of the board, but there's
you have to fight a battle every round.
There's you have to fight a battle every round. And I mean, if he gets, although it does take, it's another cool thing about the terrain, it takes more empire points to take a tile depending on the terrain on it.
Got it.
So it takes an extra point to take a forest. It takes 2 extra points to take a mountain. It takes an extra point to take a river tile unless you have a certain combination of units in the battle that you fought for it, in which case, you know, you've got like outriders and you've got scouts that have gone over, and they clearly could have gone over the river for you. So that would be a drawback of the seeming strength of Joe's position, is that those are all forest tiles that he would be growing into. So you and John are in a vast plain area that has a lot of farmland,
huge tracts of land.
Yes. But you're relatively close to each other.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much spreading out, I don't know how much elbow room you guys are going to have. And I'm kind of in a corner by myself if Joe decides to go off on his own, which I think initially he will, because I figure he's going to drive for the Weirwood circle, which is close to him, or he might drive for the Maester's Tower, which is kind of equidistant between the two of us. And John is very close to striking for the Crossroads Inn. And you, who I think chose second, didn't you?
I don't know.
I think you chose second. You're not near anything.
No.
You are near John, which it was a suspicion. Actually, that's true. You're near the mountain.
I don't know what the mountains do for me, but I just want
Russ is all themey about this.
I am.
Yep.
I am. So who's going to win? You haven't called a victor yet.
No, I don't know that I can call a victor, but if I had to guess, ABJ has been a thing for a long time, but but you're wily, and you're playing the wild ones, so
I'm a wild card.
Synergy.
I'm a wild card. That's all I'm saying.
And but John is, it's here another interesting thing to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire again. John's not a big fan of A Song of Ice and Fire in the world because John he loves stories with heroes, right?
Right.
And he needs people to
There's no heroes
cheer
in that show.
on.
Yeah.
And of course, most of the heroes are dead
All
by
the real heroes
third
die.
book,
Yeah, right.
if not the first book.
Spoilers.
Spoiler alert. And so he's like, no, I like the game and the system is great. I'm not a super big. And his other issue, which I totally understand, is that the characters that you can use in your army, they don't all live in the same timeline.
Right.
So some of them are separated by, a few years, but they're very important mortal years.
Or they're dead
or
when the other one's alive.
Or they're dead when the other one's alive.
Right.
And so you have to sort of be kind of elastic with that. There's not I guess you could totally agree to sort of do themed and there's a couple people that do videos on YouTube.
I played War Machine with different timelines.
Exactly.
Warcasters, I'm fine.
Exactly. And so you have to be okay with that. And what we did I initially actually built the north out of these tiles, which you can do, which was really cool. But I couldn't put
There's no snow on your tiles, though. You need to work on that.
That's true. That's true. I thought about that, but then I thought that would be insane. I put the cities where the cities really were, and I just couldn't make it work so that there were 4 fair deployments. And ultimately, if you follow the rules, everybody chooses one of the forts. They don't choose their own. They place a fort, and then again you roll and randomly determine the order you get to pick them in. And I felt like I had a map and I had 4 places, but there was some that were very more advantageous. And since I made them all, I didn't think it was fair. But the hex system is so flexible, you could totally do that, which I thought was neat. And so we're going. So we made the map, and I then assigned towns that were kind of close to where they ended up. Once I flipped it so that the north was along one edge,
And you squint.
There is a certain squinting required. And then I came up with a really fluffy way, like, what are the Dothraki doing in the north near the wall? Why are the Lannisters in the north? Because everybody got to choose. We have
It's the end of the books.
Among us, we have 5 factions to choose
It sort of works
from.
near the end of the books, honestly.
And it does, but then half of the characters that you've got are dead. So,
Details.
but you know what? It's kind of cool, because what if Khal Drogo hadn't dragged his heels about crossing the poisoned water and had gone, and what if they'd been told by their advisors that the north was in disarray because the Stark army was trapped below the neck?
Right.
And what if the Lannisters knew that, and so they came up and they attacked the north, and that's where the Targaryens landed, and of course you've got the free folk coming over, and
We're
of
always
course
a
the
threat.
the Night's Watch are always there. So I came up with decent enough reasons why everybody could be fighting in that, which I thought was a neat way that the game is relatively flexible too. So it's kind of like an alternative history if you're hooked on the history aspect of the game. But if not, like, John is just thinking, well, the Night's Watch is a really cool group, and the models are cool, and the system's really cool, so he's just going to play it in that
So
angle.
what I'm hearing from you is there are fluff justification reasons
Yep.
and player tactical reasons that anybody could win this.
I believe that
And
is
the
the
only
case.
way our listeners can find out what happens is to listen to future episodes of this show.
Indeed.
Now,
Indeed.
we got our brand new Discord servers up for our patrons.
Yep.
Are you going to put your rules up there along with your pictures?
I think what I'll do is I will get rid of all of the pictures in the rule system, because
that
that's
could be-
not really
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
And I will
you've got IP infringing pictures.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, these are just for our friends, and I just wanted them to look cool.
So you need to remove the
I will be removing
copyright
all
issues.
of the artwork,
You
and
put
so
that
it
up there?
won't be.
And then some
looking
pictures
super
of the map so
cool.
people know where everybody is.
But yeah, absolutely, there's going to be so I can send you those, or I
All right.
can figure it out.
Well, send them to me. I'll put them up in the Discord server. You can check
Okay.
them all over there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am gonna. Does it do video?
Yeah, it does everything.
I'll
We got
send.
videos of our Star Wars Legion games up there.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
So I'll send you that video, the little intro video.
Yeah.
And I'll post that on Twitter too. And I think I'll be doing that regularly after each campaign round once the empires start to spread.
Nice.
And
there's a
thing
battle
is-
report section in there now, so you can post
Oh,
them all in
you
there,
go.
and people can track.
Absolutely, that's
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah, and it's not going to be over quickly, because and the other thing that I thought was serendipitous and why I thought this would be a cool thing is that all of our lives have sort of settled down into, we can at least get together every other week usually.
Right.
And Joe lives in another state, but he can get up to play a game every other week usually.
Of course, we all wear masks. We're all masked
Oh,
up.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
we're
very safe. Very safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Very safe. So, that'll all be up there for people to peruse.
Excellent. All right, Craig. Well, thanks for sharing. We're
No,
very
I'm-
excited.
I'm
and we'll
very excited.
Keep a lookout for more updates in the future.
Absolutely.
You're listening to the D6 generation. Born to game.
Hey everyone, I hope you're all enjoying the ever-evolving format of the D6 generation. Constantly trying to figure out what we can do to keep some exciting content on here. We're always evolving it. We kind of want to reflect what we're doing, how we're gaming through all this excitement, and evolving our lifestyles and our passion for gaming, fitting it into the state of the world. So, as you may have noticed, of course, we have got a lot more D&D content going on, but Craig and I are also doing all kinds of crazy gaming, and we're trying to interject that as well. So we've gone to sort of every other episode situation. Just a quick update here, where one episode will be Dungeons and Dragons content from our live play, and then the next episode we're going to inject segments back into the show, usually about miniature gaming, board gaming, anything else we can think of, and probably be multi-segments whenever we can make it work, about a different topic. For example, in today's episode, you just heard the beginning be about Craig's new Song of Ice and Fire campaign, which we're excited to get started. And then the upcoming segment, the one coming right after this, is actually going to feature a discussion between Rafe and all the guys in our D&D campaign about how they come up with their characters. So about role-playing, but it applies to pretty much any role-playing game. Not necessarily just playing content. It's a little behind the curtain type stuff. Hopefully you're enjoying all that. Now, a little interesting note in the upcoming segment, for example, only going to be a half an hour or so of that content, even though they talk for like an hour and 45 minutes. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, the back half of the conversation got really into the specifics of our campaign. But secondly, they got a little more comfortable in their discussion, let's just say. And some of the commentary moved a little bit to PG-13, a little higher rating, maybe even occasionally the R language of swearing kind of coming in there. So thought it might be better to put it over on the Lost Chapters and Patreon. This might be a good opportunity to remind everybody a great way you can support the show is to become a D6 Generation patron. We got a lot of exciting things for our patrons now, a lot of great ways you can get more involved in the show and be part of the content here. First of all, there's more content for you. So if you go over there and join in as a $2 a D6 patron, we come up with new names for our patron level. So there's like D6, D8, D10. If you go in as a D6 patron, that's $2 an episode. You'll get access to all those lost chapters, right? Which is basically all the bonus content. And nowadays, since we're doing the D&D stuff, that includes a lot of video-related content. Even the discussion coming up next around making your own player characters, the lost chapters version of that, not only is it longer with extra content, but it actually has video included as well. We've also just launched the D6 Generation Discord server, which has a lot of great channels on there. And depending on your level of patronage, you get access to more and more of those channels. We're also bringing back the ability to have notes and shout-outs read on the air. If you'd like to do that, you need to be a D10 level patron. And if you are a D10 level patron, you can go into our one of the channels over there. You'll have exclusive access to a Read on Air Discord channel where you can post whatever you'd like us to read on the air. And I'll read it in this little segment here between segments to give your either your business a little shout-out, say hi to a friend or family member, whatever you want to do. If you remember the old school D6G shoutouts, it's sort of like that, but it can be longer now, so it doesn't have to be like a 10-second shoutout. You can actually make it a little paragraph or something if you'd like to. So, anywho, give that all a go, but really appreciate your support. All of our amazing patrons keeping the lights on here. You are how we pay the bills, and you get us excited for more. We're also excited to be doing live streaming. We're going to be experimenting with more of that again, and being able to listen to that and participate in that is also going to be a patron exclusive. So head on over to get involved at being a patron. A couple easy ways to do it. Go to the d6generation.com, click the Patreon logo on the right-hand side. That'll take you there. Or just go to patreon.com/the D6 Generation to find out more. All right, that's enough about that. Back to the next segment, whatever that is. Oh, yes, talking about playing a character in a role-playing game.
Is your character not as agile as you would like?
Karlik looks at Euphemia and says, I really wish he would have missed, and then just falls over.
Is DM's grace in short supply?
Oh, and the candles go out on the Minotaur's horns.
Is compassion not your character's strong suit?
Minotaur more like beef or more like cannibalism? I'm asking for a friend.
Is persuasion your dump stat?
Be prepared for a caster. These do not move on their own. There's no caster here.
Listen long enough, and you too might learn how to roleplay 8 charisma.
Hey, so everybody listening out there, I'd like to welcome you to what I'm calling Character Academy. So by the time this episode airs, you would have heard Russ do maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows, on GM Academy. You know, you never know when Russ is going to is going to put these things up on the air. And by the way, we sat him aside for this one, and I just pulled all the characters together in Adventures in Phandalin, and I'd like to introduce them by character first, and then what we're going to do is talk about playing and building role-playing characters. So I'm Rafe Granger, and I play a character called Euphemia Lightfoot. And with us today, we have Pyrrhic Starfinder, played by Seppi Yoon, along with Thralbic Frostbeard, played by John Wakelin. Good, John.
Hello.
I like how it makes much more sense to say your hello after I introduce your character name, which is unlike what I just said about 8 minutes ago. So thank you, Seppi. Ulrich Frostbeard, played by Joe Skandarian.
Buongiorno.
And Karlik, otherwise known as Cowlick Rockhoof, played by Daniel, otherwise known as Doc Crane. Hey, Doc.
Good evening. And if it's not good evening for you, just role play right now that it is.
That's a perfect way to start. So those of you that are tuning in, I want this to be, a way for you to learn how to play and build a D&D character. Most of us sitting around this table today I probably played this in our early teens, 13, 14 years old, and have been playing it ever since. But with the situation of COVID, there's a lot of at-home gaming going on. And I know in my own professional circle as a business coach, I'm part of a BNI chapter. I have people ask me, hey, how do you play Dungeons and Dragons? And they hear about it, and they might even see it on the different TV shows now that highlight it. And back in our day, it wasn't exactly chic. I didn't walk into school with my D&D backpack and my dice bag. I sort of kept that, low profile so I wouldn't get stuffed into a garbage can or something like that. At least that was me back in my day. I wasn't proud of my geekdom. But like today's day and age, it's like a badge of honor to be a geek, which is definitely cool. And so I
was
get a lot
captain of my chess team. Rafe, don't you nerd self-hate propagate that? Oh my God, I was there the whole time.
Well, you're braver than I, that's for sure. But yeah, I get a lot of questions today these days. How do you GM, and that's what Russ and I are going to cover. But we're going to cover how to make. And when I say how to make a role playing character, I don't mean turn to page 18 of the player's handbook. We'll cover that a little bit. It's more like
what's on page 18.
how to breathe air into it. All right, who wants to talk about how they create and build characters in Dungeons and Dragons? Who wants to go first? All right, John, I'm picking you.
No. Okay. I was pointing at Seppi, but on my screen.
Seppi's going to go second.
Am I going to go second? I can go anywhere you want. I'll answer any question. I just wanted to see. I like
I'll start off. I'm probably the second oldest person here, so I'll start off. So anyway, I've been playing D&D since third grade. My brother, the DM Russ, in our current game, brought it home from school when his friends introduced it to him. And his description of D&D was you spend hours making up characters, then you go through a dungeon till you meet the dragon, you kill the dragon, and then you kill each other and see who ends up with the treasure.
Oh, interesting.
So that was my introduction to D&D. But it's come a long way. My favorite thing about D&D is role playing and character creation. I like creating a character and creating a background and trying to create a personality that I'm trying to play. I do have certain things I stick to, which I mean, sometimes people look at D&D. First of all, I guess with D&D, you're basically role playing a character you create. For those of you who are trying to figure out how to play D&D. And it looks like a bunch of stats and stuff on a piece of paper, and all that stuff's important for combat. But it's also about a personality you set up, and you try to role play with your friends. And that level of role playing can go, and they explain it in the books now too. But that level of role playing can go a lot of different ways. You can third person describe your character. You can try to give your character, like you'll notice some of us have accents that we try to do. Accents are tough because if you're not good at, like mine comes and goes, but it's a fantasy world, so it doesn't have to be a specific accent.
Right.
It can be whatever you want. It's funny though, because I think it's because of Warcraft, or I'm not sure which one introduced the kind of Scottish heavy English accent as a dwarven thing. Right. But most people, like, it was actually Adric's player who was, remind me who was playing Adric before we came on?
Terrace.
He started with it, so I think Joe and I decided we had to have something similar because we're supposed to be related to him. And then, interestingly enough, in Doc's game, his Tyler does the same accent for his dwarf, roughly, just because it's become a dwarven thing. So anyway, you can try to do accents. You can do whatever you want. That's the fun thing about D&D. You can do it to whatever level you want. Some people really enjoy the strategic, because it's evolved from just a paper game and totally using your imagination to a lot of tabletop rules now. So there's a lot of strategy involved in the actual combats. And some people really, like, we've played with a DM that every encounter you're on the edge of your seat trying to stay alive. Joe and I have played with them. And so you have to do everything strategically right, or a lot of times you're losing characters.
Oh, you just hit a button and muted yourself, John.
It was okay. It was going off the rails.
It's fun, but that's just a different way of playing.
Let me.
Anyway, that's the overall of D&D. Go ahead, Seppi. I'm sorry.
I want to ask one question, then I'm going to throw it to Seppi and then Joe. When you said you build a personality, how do you do that? How do you, John Wakeland, do that?
So two things I do, two basic things. I pick a character style, like, so that's not the personality, that's the class and how they're going to play within the class. That's the amazing thing about D&D. There's exponential ways you can build a character. So, and every facet of it gives you more ways to build it. And so I basically pick a style, like how I want them to act, and then I build off of that with the race and everything else. So, and then I build the personality off of that. And it really depends. Sometimes I'm inspired by a personality that I want to build off. Sometimes I'm inspired by an actual mechanical build that I think through with feats and all those kinds of things and how they're going to end up. And sometimes I'm just inspired by like something you see on TV and you want to create something similar to that. Or a personality you see on TV. I have a character, this is going to sound really lame, but I have kids, but they're all older now. But I have a character I'm currently playing that I'm trying to run similar to Flynn Rider from Tangled, just personality wise. So I found I'm just amused by his personality in that movie. And so, it's just the kind of thing. I'm no actor, don't get me wrong, but I just like, those are types of things that kind of drive me.
Thank you. Seppi.
Oh, we're starting out for beginners and how to make characters. There are no rules on who you want to play. And I've had this question addressed to me because I design games for a living and I live in conventions. And so there's a lot of nerd talk. And then some people, I'm well over 40 years of playing Dungeons and Dragons. I'm super old.
Join the club.
Yeah, over 40 years of Dungeons and Dragons. So people occasionally ask, like, I don't know what to make. And I'm like, the sky's the limit, which means you can just be yourself. If you have, like, no idea where to start, be a version of you that ended up in this situation. That's perfectly acceptable. If you've always wanted to be a certain character, like somebody from Tangled, that's highly suspect. Oh my God, John.
Probably shouldn't have said that so people didn't hear that.
He started as a Bone Zone, then moved on to Flynn Rider.
Anymore. It's all right.
And as somebody who writes games for a living, I will gamify anything. A fun game is you pick your own interpretation of a character that you think people should know, and then you are that character in the story that you're playing. These are all good ways to sort of start the seed of your character.
I think that's a great starting point, is to either just emulate one of your favorite characters, and it may seem like it's so simple and people won't enjoy it, but people will, because not everybody remembers those characters that are favorite to you, or play a slightly different version of yourself. I think that's great. Seppi, before we go to Joe and Doc, Pyric is pretty fleshed out, and he's the only character, or you're the only player that has been able to like role play it without it being a fighter type or something, meaning you truly you can see his personality and he acts within his personality. And I just wondered, how did you go about that, or how do you go about that?
I don't know. I think Joe and John do a good job of being, and so does Doc. I feel like they all.
I think what Rafe is pointing out is you're one of the few people he's seen who has impressively played a coward.
Yes, actually, that is what I'm kind of saying, and being annoying. Like, that's part of what you decided to do. But yet we love playing with you. So it's not that you're annoying; you're playing a annoying character. Like.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I don't. Yeah. For Pyric, there's a couple of different things I love about Pyric. First of all, having a passion for your character helps you get to the nooks and crannies. Like John and Joe cannot stop themselves but stab each other, and that is infinitely entertaining. They always have a passion for it, and at any time that happens, that's going to give you great role-playing moments. I like to visualize the character, try to make them as actual as possible. So when I see like somebody who's overly smart and but not very a lot of charisma, I'm like, well, what is that going to look like to me? What does that sound like to me? Well, it sounds like I I should have like an accent like from people that I know. Yeah. Oh, you betcha. And so so those are how those two things end up like colliding. And so being a coward can be fun. Your character's shortcomings are really how you fall in love with your character.
Yes.
And I don't think people should steer away from them. I try to, I'm always story first. If you see, I'm always trying to push getting to the story more than anything else. Even, I mean, maybe it's at a pace where Rafe and I get to have breakfast before the getting to the combat. But, I want to experience the story that Russ wants to provide. But simultaneously, its interplayer conflict can add a lot of spice to it. Like, again, John and Joe constantly stabbing each other psychically. It's like infinitely entertaining to me. Me running away and like obsessed with accounting and bookkeeping. Yeah. That's just fun.
I have to say, and it's, you guys are at the loss of not hearing the episode where I talk about building a character, where I talk about all of you. You haven't heard that yet. I keep forgetting that you guys don't know that. And what I said was that this is the best bunch of role players I've ever been with. It's very much like I imagine that really good high improv theater actors must entertain. Like between Joe and John's antics as the brothers and their accent, between Seppi being, annoying, but then having these like sparks of brilliance. And then Doc, I want to talk to you next. And then Joe, you're going to bring up the end for this round of questions is, the way Doc plays Karlik, which is, I view as a more, he's really, it seems to me, okay with letting the other characters do what they do. He doesn't have to rob the spotlight, but then when it is your moment to shine, it's just hilarious. And so I'd love to hear, Doc, please feel free to tell us your origin, how you did it, how you build a character, but I'm most interested in how you seem to be able to be so patient and let like a verbal hog whores like me and Seppi talk all the time.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's just like what everybody has been saying, which is just really trying to have a good vision for your character. That way you have some idea what they would do inside of situation and then a vision that you want to play out too, right? So I think one of the great ways to do that is to take like the movie character or the cartoon character or yourself, right? I think that's a great tip as well. And say, okay, I'm going to build Legolas, right? I've had so many Legolas characters in my games, right? Like Legolas-like or Aragorn-like. And that's great because you can really sort of envision the dark, brooding ranger that's, ready to take on danger or whatever it is. And then that's what you role play at first because you feel like, okay, I'll know what Aragorn is going to do in the moment. So my guy, Nogara, right, is going to do X or, whatever it is. I think that's really helpful.
Okay.
For me, I find Karlik or Kalik difficult to play because, Russ made the character, which is a lot of fun to sort of get the pre-gen and be like, okay, this is what I've got now. What do I do with it? And for me, I've never played a bard before. Like I'm not really all that into music for one thing. So that makes it challenging for me to play. But I liked how Russ kind of put these like notes in there that he does bend himself to like those who are around him to sort of like fit in, and his mood might change depending on others. So to me, yeah, I think that's exactly right, Rafe, as I try to play and riff off of what other people have been doing. And I've actually been considering, like with Ulrich and Thrall, to start doing this not agreeing thing because Karlik would want to get in on that. He'd be like, oh yeah, I can also not agree with the both of you. Like I'm your longtime lost brother. I've not quite taken that step yet, but it's that sort of like thought process and then trying to figure it out. But he is a bard. And so for me, I can kind of rhyme. And so it enables me to one, like follow whatever the group's doing, but also gives me time to like figure out what rhyme I'm going to say in between. So a lot of the patience is one, seeing what else everyone else is doing. So I roll the top and niche all the time. And I'm like, what would Kalik do? I don't know because not anybody else is gone yet. So I love like having a nice low and niche, and it gives me plenty of time to like figure out my rhyme, whatever it is. So, but yeah, that's having that vision. That's what you have to have. And sometimes like I'll talk about my brother for a second, where he loves like the numbers and the crunchiness and he will create like this like uber powerful character, but then never figure out how to role play him. And it like really bothers him, but he's so crunchy, but then he can't sort of like do things in the moment. And so I think really having that clear vision of, if a bank's being robbed, knowing exactly what your character is going to do in that moment. So.
And a lot of that does come from experience. And so I do want this to be for beginners, middle, experienced, and it does. But I think these are some great tips on how to begin. And let's hear from Joe before we get more in there. Joe, where did you, I can give you what I find is very inspirational, but I kind of want to save that for maybe middle way through. But just tell us, how do you create your characters?
Super uninspirational. On page 18, it is dwarves. That's where we start.
Yes.
So glad you nailed it.
My favorite race.
Best race. That's the best race in the book.
It's my favorite race.
Yep. Thank you, Ray, for bringing that up. I'm a numbers guy too. I love the numbers. It's my favorite part of the game. And when I start a character, I want to kind of put that together. My next step that I always go for is, and which I really like in 5th edition, is the flaws and the personality that comes out, which you can draw from the player's handbook, or when in my mind, I find it so much more imaginative to draw it from a character in a book, Belgariad or Lord of the Rings or whatever it might be. I mean, whatever books you're reading at the time, draw from it. The problem that you have, or that I have, is that character is static. It's, you watch Die Hard and say, I'm building John McClane, right? And that character has a 2-hour limit, and that's all you know about him, because I never watched the sequels. And the problem you have moving forward is that the game might go on for months or sometimes years. And so your character has to evolve with the game. And so you have such different, you kind of think, well, I started out as this character, I want to go someplace. And one of the best parts of having a good dynamic group is the players you play with. And I mean, I've known John. I played with John for 40 years. And so I know his personality, and it's fun to goof on him. I'm not worried about upsetting him or stepping on his toes. Seppi, I don't know as well, but God, Seppi thinks outside the box so well and comes up with stuff like, holy shit, holy crap, I never would have thought of that. And it's so brilliant. And it makes me laugh because and if you listen to the podcast, one of the things is when the guy's like, you can't, the Red Wizard say, you can't attack me, I have my papers. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to pull something right out of, Don Quixote. Paper? Worthless. And he comes out with, you don't have the proper permits. That wasn't posted. And I never would have occurred to me.
Yeah,
but
me
the perfect
neither.
spin off of the characters allows us to build the character and then think about it outside of, just the numbers, which is again, doesn't really change much in the times you play, but the situations you put in and bouncing off the characters, knowing where to start. I'm going to have a Scottish accent. I'm going to not like my brother. And then we're going to argue like every sitcom. You're arguing. But at one moment, you're all going to turn together and go all at once, no, we hate that asshole. Kill the Red Wizard or kill the undead or whatever. And that's, everybody loves that moment when they're kind of like, they're always fighting, but all of a sudden they all come together. And that's what you look for those moments in the games. And so that's why I love, Seppi running around gathering the horses. They're more valuable than we are. That's just an awesome thing I would never think of, and saying, yeah, it's because I'm a coward. It's just a brilliant moment, and it builds on the fact, or at least when I build a character, I'm a chameleon. I'll play whatever you want. But in this game, I'm playing a paladin, so I'm kind of like, I got to be the guy that stands up front that kind of takes it. I was trying to get in front of your character, Rafe, and then you managed to take the damage. Good job. But in other games where I'm playing a rogue, I'll do my best to stay, I'm going to be in the back, or I don't want to be the face of the party. What's awesome is you got Karlik, you got myself, you got John, you got Seppi. There's all people that want to be the face of the party. And the most fun part about it is we all kind of say, yeah, we're going to make it the pathway.
Yeah.
The unintentional thing. But that, I don't want to, we're talking about the character building, but that's kind of how I go with building characters and think about it. So you start with something and then see where the group brings you. And good groups will bring you forward. Good role players will bring you forward and make you challenge you to say, what am I going to do next? In the game, one of my faults is I have a proverb for every opportunity. So the first thing I did, you asked, how do I keep coming up with these? I printed out 450 Chinese, English, whatever it is.
That's how you do it.
And I just have them in front of me. And I'm kind of like, okay, I get 450s to rattle off. And I'm just going to, Google or whatever it is, Lycos some more of them when I start running out. and I try and make them fit. You know what I mean? And
do a good job. Those are awesome.
It's great, you know. But that's one of the things, that's based off of if you ever saw Man of La Mancha, John Coco's character. I always think of myself, Your Grace, and that's why I kind of to pick that for Seppi's character, which Seppi, he was a kind of eccentric knight who was a little crazy and was really a coward. That was Don Quixote. Well, that's Seppi.
Oh,
right?
I see.
And so I'm kind of like, Your Grace, I'm right behind you, Your Grace. And he's the guy that did all the fighting and everything for him. And so I kind of pictured that, but then it goes in a different way. You know, I've kind of gotten away from that because the characters have allowed me to evolve over the months we played.
That was the one thing that Joe brought up that I just want to jump in before you move on to is character involvement is insane. Because even if, like Seppi said, or Doc, if you start with your personality because you're new to D&D, it doesn't mean you're stuck with it. Because you're going to be exposed to the other players and different situations, but also whatever the DM throws at you is going to evolve your character too. And you can take those moments like Rafe did with Euphemia. When Euphemia was her going through, exposed to the red brand up close, and then went through kind of a little psychotic moment there and had to be talked down by Seppi. But Seppi's character didn't have to do that. That was up to him. And then Rafe didn't have to play Euphemia the way he did. But those are decisions you make. That's the fun of it.
That's the fun of it.
And I can't speak for all of you guys, but I spend the difference between DMing and playing. I'll spend times going, oh, how would my player to react to this situation? Especially when I get to re-listen to the episodes, which is completely new to me because I've been playing for 40 years, but never listened to myself play. And so that's kind of fun. And you're like, oh, I did. And the funny thing is I am kind of like, and I'm sure we're all this way. I'll be listening to it and be like, I should say this, forgetting what I said. And then I do say it. And I'm like, oh, I'm pretty much who I am when I respond to things. But yes, the evolvement is huge, allowing your character to evolve. And I think, if we keep playing, Doc, we'll bring that out in your brother too. I think you can bring that out, especially if you have players that part of the nice thing of playing with somebody, like I play a lot with my family because my kids are older and we got them into it, or my brother's family. They know I'm the goofy uncle, whatever. I can say whatever I want. There's no judging. And that's tough when you're with new people for new players. But I've known Rafe and Seppi. I'd already listened to so many episodes. I knew I was going to get along with everybody. Oh. And then I even listened to Doc's first episode. So, Seppi comes up all the cool things to say. Doc comes up with all the cool strategies, like sleeping the horses. I've never seen that before.
Never seen that.
In the game, I don't know if anybody's listened, but we had horses that were running away, and I've never seen a person turn around and use his spell to sleep the steeds that were running, which was awesome. And so that kind of stuff. And like I said, I've been playing for 40 years and never seen anybody do that. And Rafe brings up stuff like, I've never seen anybody use animal handling. And, that's the cool thing. It's like going to make your own adventure and the DM is plotting it out and you get to choose, and it's crazy.
One of the things I absolutely love about Joe's character is this Proverbs is sort of a indictment for his wisdom, while simultaneously he's actually not very smart and he goes and does dumb things. So he understands all of these how to roll with it moments, like he's unflappable, but he's just not very bright. He sort of means well, but simultaneously he's really not the very bright.
I will charge into the pit and then give you a proverb in the way from the bottom. Light the darkness.
It's allowing yourself, and that's something that Joe's brought out more and more and more and more and more and more and more. And Doc's like running joke with the bugbears. Like the things that you do become in these shticks that you do become the backbone of how you're delivering yourself again and again and again. And then the characters will have different feelings about them, right? And they don't always have to agree.
One of the things which I like is that, and I think this makes a big difference, if during the week or whatever time between games, you think about your character, and again, listening to the podcast again, but more importantly, we text each other throughout the week, and it keeps things fresh, and it makes me think about my character, where I want to go, and stuff like that. And that's huge too, because the more you think about the character, the more you evolve it. If you only play it for 2 or 3 hours a week or every other week, you don't put much thought into it. It doesn't have a chance to evolve. But again, one of the nice things about this group, I feel it just keeps evolving because we keep things that we didn't have time to get to in the game can evolve in off screen. and even become running jokes.
It's a wellspring of inspiration.
Seppi's let's go to the well. Let's go into the well.
No, let's not do it.
Can't avoid the well.
Before we go to the well, so just so I'm clear,
I'm quickly.
Gate 3, the well brings you to the Underdark. Okay, the game Russ plays. Every well you go into gives you treasure. Okay, we come to the well. I figure it's a no-brainer. You look in the well, there's a loose brick, there's a magic thing, there's a bag of gold. It doesn't matter. We spent, half an hour goofing each other, freezing the water, and then thank God Euphemia saw the light and said, yes, I think this dwarf's onto something. And that has been a running joke going the whole time since it happened. And I'm sure Russ had no plans for it, had no idea what to put in the bottom of the well. And it was part of the module, but hadn't thought about it. And that's what these characters have done. They've evolved that and made that into a whole thing that wasn't even part of the module.
My favorite quote from our text chain recently has to be today when I said, "We don't need any more proof of evil. Dwells and wells coexist," right? That's like they exist in the same universe, because this is how pervasive this running joke is in our text chain.
Let's I want to go to let's go to the intermediate in experience. I'm quickly seeing that I think this episode should just morph into what it is, which is kind of us reminiscing and picking our highlights. And so, Seppi, Joe alluded to it already. One of my highlights is, John, you're better at setting the scene than I am. Set the scene for people who may not have heard it about the undead with the writ of.
Okay. So I've gone back and listened to it, but it was very. We had to remember what we were told. So this Order of the Gauntlet is an order of light. They're anti-undead, but they're also very tunnel vision and very strict. And we didn't know anything about them. I know a little bit about them from other games. They're a normal order in the Sword Coast. So it's like other people will know, players that have played before will know who they are. But trying to play in your character, my character particularly he has nothing to do with civilization, so he's not going to know who these guys are. But he did say kill undead. He said that there was undead. We translated to attacking miners, but they said they were causing trouble for the miners. And the miners told him. So that was from the miners' point.
And we mean miners with pickaxes.
Yes, yeah, people mining, not little kids. And so these miners basically reported to the town that they were being harassed by undead and they couldn't do their mining. And we took that as they're being attacked by undead, because usually undead attack things. So we approached this area known as the Owl Well, this ruin, intent on taking out the undead. And lo and behold, there's a tower full of zombies. So we're going to wipe out the zombies. That's what we were told to do.
So we started a zombie in your life.
Yeah, so we start attacking zombies. Everybody killed zombies. So we start attacking the zombies. And then there's also this plush tent set up in there, which as a player, I'm like, well, there's where the necromancer is, the caster, the bad guy in my head.
Bad guy, right.
Bad guy.
In my mind, I'm thinking that's where the treasure is. So
right, because that's where Joe always thinks where's the treasure. And I'm thinking, okay, the bad guy's in there. We got to deal with the minions first. That's the strategy side of it. And I'm like, we got casters and stuff, and we got thunder waves which now we know summon dragons. We didn't know that before. But so we got thunder waves all, between the bard and I. We're going to just lay these guys out. So we start going in and doing our thing. Euphemia's ripping them apart. Well, Euphemia's actually trying to get in the tent because she's smart. She's trying to figure out what's in the tent. And we're doing our thing. And then this giant, bad-looking, it's actually called a badass skeleton, according to my brother. So this thing steps out. This is this guy's child, we find out later, but he looks like he's built for war or worse.
He would have chopped through the entire party, by the way. That guy was a monster. He steps
out with his 2 blades, and we're like, oh, no, bad guy. So we start attacking that thing. And while we're in the middle of all this skirmish, this nerdy little red wizard comes out with his paperwork and starts complaining that he's authorized to do this and that we're actually in the wrong attacking all of his people. So that's what happens as far as in the middle of all this is a well. Just so you know.
And I want to pick up
I will add that I realized later that's probably where the treasure was, not the tent.
Yes.
That's where the ring was.
I want to pick it up from here, then hand it over to Seppi, because I think what startled the all of us about this brilliance that he did is we're all like, here are the bad guys. Time to kill, right? And Seppi, I'll let you take it over from there, starts to go, wait. And we're all like, huh? So Seppi, how did you come up with that or think of that? Explain that.
I'm a little obsessed with trying to actualize Dungeon Dragons mechanics into real things, right? I've got, over 40 years of playing, and I'm like, what does a chaotic good person look like, right? Traditionally you go, oh, he's a Robin Hood, right? But I'm like, well, all right, flexibility about property. We have a lot of stories of good-meaning thieves, like thieves with a heart of gold. They're just like other types of adult work, and I'm like, well, maybe it's a person who doesn't think that you should pass judgment on other people. Maybe that's the level of where that is. And so I was like, okay, well, I honestly would not have done it if Doc had not read. I was on board with the Red's on. Obviously that's a bugbear. We must kill this bugbear necromancer. But then Doc hampered me with the moral responsibility of Russ whining that this guy wasn't actually evil. And I'm like, okay, now in good conscience, if I'm good and I'm not lawful and we have the situation, do we really take NPC's word for what's going on? And as somebody who's of my 40 plus years, I've GM'd much more than I've played, right? I can almost name every character that I've played. I'm the forever GM for the groups that we've been in, right? And so, and I love Pyric so much. And I'm like, Pyric has this real moral dilemma. I'm like, and then, so there's this back and forth, but the dwarves are like, this is absolutely a no-brainer that the undead have to go. I'm like, okay, you said that absolutely has to happen, dwarves. We're going to give you what you want. But this guy, do they need to be murdered? And do we need to take all their stuff? Yeah, and no one has died yet. If somebody Euphemia had gotten stabbed by this guy, right? There are all these red flags for Pyric when he switches from Pyric, lovable coward, to psychotic pyromaniac, where he is just going to rip up the world. And one of them is Euphemia getting hurt currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those triggers can change, right? But typically he doesn't, he cares about the horses. He's running away, right? And then something will happen, and then boom, I'm burning this entire castle to the ground. Mm-hmm. So what happened in that situation was me trying to convince the party not to pass summary judgment on somebody we just have to take somebody else's word for. And we didn't have complete summary judgment because we know that the guy's thoughts had no malice. He was just appalled by what we were doing to his children/property.
If he was a peaceful wizard, he wouldn't have brought that badass skeleton. That was my thing.
No, he's just a Franken monster.
We're still arguing about it, but this is actually owed to the GM or DM.
It is.
And I think most of us have DM'd here, and part of DMing, because you have the trope, the D&D trope. There's actually an old video where this comes up, and where they did this thing like a trope with the players, where the main bad guy or the perceived bad guy starts talking, and the player inevitably wants to get the first shot off and shoots him in the head. And so what you have to do as a DM, and Russ has successfully done, you have to create scenarios where that ends up poorly if you do that, because the person is either innocent or potentially innocent, or as Joe did to us once, not who we thought it was. We thought we were assassinating the bad guy when we snuck up, and it was actually the kidnapped prince that we were supposed to be rescuing because he was held up in this position to look like the bad guy. So we actually killed the guy we were supposed to be getting. So those kinds of things make you stop jumping at shadows and learn to look before you leap. And so as a DM, because I like to GM a lot too, you're trying to create scenarios like that and throw them in on a semi-regular basis to make people think. And if you have good players like Seppi, you know, that starts thinking and then makes the other players think, oh my God, maybe this guy's right. So then the fun part is you start doing that in your head. You're like, okay, what is my character going to do? Should I keep fighting? Is Pyric right? And that's the cool part of the game. And I don't, you know, Calic, go ahead, Doc, you can jump in. I mean, he sees everything's a bugbear, so I don't know how he makes his decisions, but.
Yeah, it was really challenging for me in that because Calic is the follower. And so then there was this debate going on. And like for me in Calic's mind, I kept being swayed back and forth. Like, what would Calic do? And so any opportunity I would have had to like get in some dialogue there would have been to support both groups if I could. And then at the same time, you know, say that this guy is a bugbear because that, you know, that is what Calic thought.
That's a thing.
But it made me, because up until that point, I thought we were sort of in a standard Dungeons and Dragons trope where it would be really obvious who the bad guy was. And then as soon as that happened, I was really quite ecstatic because I'm like, oh, this is great because now I've really got to be second guessing the situations.
Well, one of the neat things about that whole scenario is the Red Wizards of Thay are bad people.
Yeah.
And I like things that are goblins are bad, humans good, but I like the fact that some good goblins. There's always that, you know, that Dark Elf Ranger, you know, who's the good guy as opposed to, you know, whatever it is. And so it does give you pause, and a good DM will set up scenarios, and good players just won't go through hack and slashing it. They realize, holy crap, I got to listen to Seppi sometimes because maybe he's right.
Oh no! Don't do that. Pyric's insane. Pyric's he's also the one. He's also like, oh my God, they're zombies that they're not moving. We're gonna blow them up first. I'm gonna blow them up before they even get here.
Our group dynamic is we listen to Seppi and then do what Euphemia says to do.
Right. I have to say that I'm like Seppi. I almost said Pyric. In that I've often thought about Dungeons and Dragons. You know, what happens when it's not just talking with your sword? You know, how do we break out of the trope? And I think that was what was so enjoyable about that, is Seppi as a player broke us out of that trope. Because like all of a sudden Euphemia, she's not a murderous assassin. She's not that kind of rogue. You know, she's the Han Solo. I don't model her after Han Solo, but the Han Solo type of robe is the I don't know the right. I say it wrong. The irrescapable or the irreverent, you know, lovable rogue type of
scoundrel.
Yeah. But although she doesn't have the scoundrel side either, but that is the typical stereotype.
Too short to be Han
that
Solo.
robe.
Besides that, she's right there.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, so all of a sudden I had to think like, oh yeah, I can't just stick this guy with a bunch of arrows. Like, he's a person, as strange as that sounds in this game. And so talk about how the characters evolved. That's what created me to sort of backfill in. Part of her backstory is she was part of the Red brand, not the Red Wizards of Thay, but she confused those two in her mind. And that's what sent her on her, you know, murderous intent, I guess, before giving the guy a chance.
Red's always an instigating color for bulls. So
yes, and
we did have our own bull. I will also add one thing. One of the reasons I keep thinking about it and it keeps coming up is I'm sure Russ being Russ and a good DM he is, at some point that's going to come back to bite us. Because
absolutely coming back around.
He had paperwork. And I'm
he had paperwork.
And I'm going to say
we have that paperwork now.
Although not anymore, right? Because they ran off on the horses.
Oh no, the paperwork's in my spell book.
Oh, okay.
He did not drop the council by accident. That's coming around at some point.
I think to myself, when we're in my mind when we're role playing that, what am I going to say to defend myself? You know, what are we going to do as a party? Because they're going to be like, you did something illegal, and we're going to be like, whose laws are we dealing with? And we get the order of the gauntlet
because that always works.
And there is no right or wrong for that. It is
right.
That morally gray area where the law of the land, Thay, might be different than the law of, you know, the Fandling, you know, where we are.
Well, that's an example out to those players. One of those things you get to think about outside the game because you know that's potentially coming, and you're like, all right, how's my person going to handle these situations? And so that's just fun stuff to think about.
I want to give big props to Russ, though. With a group like ours, he allows us to create our own narratives. Like, the Cave Inn, some GMs are like, no, you kill that bugbear. I'm like, no, I'm going to convert him.
Right.
Right? I have literally the proof of sorcery and the power of God and this chance that he could make another thing. And we will like ritualistically scar the crap out of him. And let him know that the consequence for actually following his true calling, which should be cooking, is horrible, the screaming, terrible death. Because we did invade his home and murdered everyone he worked with.
That is so
and that's the other thing about D&D for the newer players and and I've heard this on other podcasts, so I'm not the only one, but you're building a story together.
Yes.
You're telling the story together, and the DM, as a GM, I've done this, and I know Russ does it. You feed off of what the players want and things they do. Like when listening to that thing, I'm like, and it's too bad in some ways. I mean, I'm glad because I got to get into the game, so that's a selfish one. But because Hallwinter left, I could have, as I was listening to it, I could envision how cool it would be for you guys to take over the mansion and to do cool things and put a statue in the town and all the cool things that Seppi was plotting, so that kind of stuff is really fun. And Russ would have run with that. I know he would have. So those kinds of things are what a good DM runs with and allows their players to create those things and to really just kind of go with everything,
And if you're a DM, and especially for multiple campaigns, what I know Russ has done and John has done, and you do it in the same world, you can do it years before, years after, coinciding, and so it makes the world that much more real to the players, because the cave in, if you play in Russ's game again, that's a real thing. I mean, that came out. You can run into it, and so the world becomes that much more real. And you didn't even invent it; your players invented it.
Right. So peek behind the curtain. How when you watch, like when you're watching Mandalorian and they have like cameos or stuff with people, or even in the last Clone Wars or whatever, they had cameos of Sabine's mom and stuff like that. And you're like, oh yeah. Well, when you start playing with Russ enough or the same DM and you're in the same world, like that statue being pulled down is my son's character from Tyranny of Tiamat.
Oh.
That's his paladin character that had become like a hero. And so that's why when I got it wrong that he was a half dragon, I'm like, oh, don't tell him because don't. And he's like, oh, it's already recorded, because he would have been mad at me.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that was a reference to Firefly. That's
the whole phase thing is because of what our group did. Yeah. So that's kind of stuff is really cool.
It just happened. I followed Russ's suit. I'm playing with my nieces and nephews on Sundays, and they've never played before, and they just evolved. I'm doing a module, but I just described a giant fireplace in the tavern, classic introduction. And they became fascinated by the stones. They wanted to know who made them and what made the fireplace. So I'm like, oh, the dwarves made them, and there's a secret rune, and they're now fascinated about what that rune is. And so I'm like, ooh, adventure hook. There's a whole adventure hook of who's the dwarf. And they're like, that dwarf's gonna be back in a week, right? We can go back and talk to him. I'm like, yep, you can go back and talk to him. So anyway, so to your point, the players can create the story.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.